What is going on? Okay, that was too loud. How about I start over and say, hey, what's going on? This is episode 6. Redone, rehashed, redo. That's what I'm calling it. Episode 6 redo of TJRS, the John Rock Show. I am yours truly, and I'm feeling kind of mellow tonight. I hope that's a good thing, feeling kind of mellow, because we all do need to at times, do we? Already a minute into the show, and I'm already stumbling over my words. So yeah, took a day off yesterday. I was feeling tired on Tuesday night, and I just couldn't be able to do the show. I was just like, yeah, I'm not going to be able to go on the show without not yawning, so I better get some shut-eye. I feel rested. Tried to come back tomorrow or yesterday, and I was like, well, I'll take a day off. Everyone needs a day off every now and then, right? So, and I know that my days off don't always come announced. That's something I truly need to work on. I know. Why is it asking me to customize my logo? I have a customized logo for those who are watching on YouTube. And because it's at the bottom, it's at the bottom of my screen, right at the bottom of your screen. We are watching the show. Oh, where my one Twitch viewer just popped in. Hey, how you doing? Waving hi. Because I'm hoping that you can just say hi in the chat. Which, by the way, is open. I should say this. I've never really displayed this, but the chat, I'm sure anyone who knows, who will probably watch this in the future, will be like, there's the chat. This is where the chat's, the chat blog will display. So, anyway, great to have the one viewer, as always. I'm grateful. Happy to have you. So, welcome to, as I said, number 6, redone, since I was too damn tired. Oh, what a day, eh? What a day. Just like a Thursday to unwind and relax before Friday, before the weekend starts. Ooh, you know, that kind of thing. How about the applause? And a cheer. And maybe a and then I hope that's enough, because yeah. I'm trying my best, y'all. I'm so trying my best at this. But I think I've gotten kind of good at doing streams like this. You know, not to burst my own ego or exploit my own ego, but what are we going to talk about tonight? Yeah, what's to talk about? I will save announcements and stuff for later. I don't want to get into that, so that yet. And let's see, what are we going to talk about tonight? Because there's so much. I mean, well, the recall election happened. Gavin Newsom survived almost being defeated by a right-leaning, far-right talk show host. So there's that. I mean, I'll say this too. He survived the recall, but he is up for re-election in a year, so he dodged a bullet. Let's see if he can dodge another one next year. But we'll see if anyone on the right and on the left is going to challenge him. I mean, his elder can come back for a recall, no pun intended, rematch rather. That's probably a better word. He'd come back for a rematch next year and say, "Hey, heard you missed me while I'm back." That kind of thing. He'll probably lose again. His elder is just Larry Elder is just ugh. He's all sorts of not awesome, folks. I'm just gonna say that right here, right now. All sorts of not awesome. So, what else? What else? Elder lost his race. Newsom survived the recall. Yeah, I mean, nothing at the top of my head. I think I should do more research. I think we should probably delve into the news headlines. Let's do that. I wish I had a graphic thing that you could say, "Now here are the news headlines." Then off to the races. Oh, so yeah, China counting on dinosaur. Wait a minute. There's just so much going on. Let's do Google News. Let's just news of Google. I stand sharing the screen. This is the weirdest thing. It's like screen sharing everything. Or it's gonna be 88 tomorrow. Man, isn't there anything? Let's look in the entertainment section. I guess we might as well get on our world. Just as if we can't get a hold of it, I mean, just when we thought Piers Morgan, we couldn't get any Piers Morgan, he is rejoining. Yeah. Look at this 10 pounds of not awesome. Yes, former CNN host like no deal with Fox News Corp to host a daily talk show that will stream Fox Nation in the US. I'm thrilled to be returning to News Corp, which is where I began my media career more than 30 years ago. Rupert Murdoch has been a constant champion of free speech, and we're going to be building something new and exciting together. Oh, freaking break. Yes, I know, he succeeded Larry King Live until for 3 years, and then he said some stuff about Meghan Markle. Like, this guy is no... I mean, yeah, he was a newspaper reporter in Britain, but I was sharing my screen. I wouldn't share the actual articles. So hold on. Let me rewind and start that again. Let me rewind and say that again because I didn't realize I was still screen sharing the news headline. Yeah, Piers Morgan, a bunch of doubly, triply, not awesome. Yucked over that. He joins Fox Nation. Yeah, found a new outlet. Former CNN host signed a global deal. What do they mean by global deal? Like, when they say global, like, if I was able to sign, actually, like if you sign a refund, like if you sign a deal like that it says global, I gotta make this screen bigger, you know. Where's there? Okay. Yeah, I mean, where are we gonna like? If you say global deal, what does that necessarily mean? Like, geez, I mean, when you say global deal, meaning like, is it lifelong? Is it forever? I mean, what the hell? Yeah, so anyway, I'm thrilled to be returning to News Corp, which is where I began my media career more than 30 years ago, he said in a statement. Rupert Murdoch has been a constant and fearless champion of free speech, and we're going to be building something very new and exciting together. I'm gonna give me a damn boy. This guy, yeah, this guy is like 10 times not awesome. I'm just gonna say that. I'm just gonna be blunt. Like, I've barely been watching him when he was on CNN because he was just unbearable to watch and he was worthless. There was nothing good about him when he was doing Piers Morgan's show on CNN. And then he went to Good Morning Britain and made some comments about Meghan Markle. And I mean, of course, like he got in the news business, so to speak, as a conservative like newspaper reporter. But aside from that, he has very little knowledgeable journalism experience. His resume shows no um, true journalism news experience at all, aside from being on reality TV, which is America's Got Talent, and obviously Celebrity Apprentice. And I bet you, of course, it's going to be a big old conservative right-wing Trump fest. Trumpian fest, as I like to say. A big old conservative right-wing Trumpian fest of goop. Oh, but yeah, that's just something I don't really want to talk about. I don't want to talk about it. Just stop contradicting myself. Um, what else? What else? Jacobin, the Left Socialist magazine, turned its birthday today. So I said hey to Mikey Utrecht, who is writer at Jacobin, journalist, writer at Jacobin. Said, hey, Jacobin's birthday. And I was like, happy birthday at Jacobin. So if you can, if you haven't already, be respectful. Wish Jacobin a happy birthday. Because if it weren't for them, they wouldn't be able to. If it weren't for them, I wouldn't be involved in continuing on the left. Give people like Piers Morgan something to eat crow at. That's not the best insult. It is not the best freaking insult. Anyway, let's see. Yeah. Sorry. It happens, folks. Just so if you sound bored or sound mellow. Let's see. Oh, you know what movie I saw? And this movie, I first saw it in middle school when I was 13. And I just found out that it's at the moment it's on YouTube for free. And it's Dead Poets Society. Dead Poets Society. I reckon if you have not seen it, or if you have not seen it for the first time, you should see it. If you haven't seen it, if you know what the movie is, of course, you should give it another watch because I'm telling you, this movie is awesome. It's also very informative. I'll say that. It's probably one of Robin Williams' best roles, dramatically, next to the Bill Hunter. And a young Ethan Hawke. I can't believe that kid was like, he was like 20. He was like 20, 21. He's like 50. But he was early 20s. And it's on, I think it's just on YouTube. But I think if you have any other streaming device, like Roku or Amazon Fire or whatever you use, you can try to find it. If you have like services like Hulu. Nose is itchy. trying to think for something newsworthy to, to watch. I should put that in the search. Something newsworthy. Oh man, yeah. Something newsworthy. Yeah. Try to find that, and it's like news. Or actually, let's look at something. Let's look at something and then we'll pick the headlines. But, you have your way with me. We're looking at the Afghanistan papers with Craig Whitlock. Where do I want to go? I can go PBS NewsHour, I can do Democracy Now!, I can do Majority Report. I'll probably do Majority. I love this music. I so love this music. Yeah, we'll have to watch the whole show. I don't think I have. At least I don't see it. But let me try to find it. I want to find I'm sorry. I want to try to find the actual interview, not just the whole show. Michael Tracy's in. Of course they are. Oh. First yawn of the night. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to do that. It's a habit. I think I'm getting tired, so let me just skip to the interview. I think this is it right here. Well, wait. I didn't share my screen. This episode. Then again, I tend to read the show as it is. You see the show for the sports, antics, and all. That's what makes it a good show. What makes it interesting? So, okay. Let me try to do this again. Now, I won't do my screen.
Okay, want to welcome to, I promise you. Okay, want to welcome to the program Craig Whitlock, investigative reporter at the Washington Post, author of the Afghanistan papers, A Secret History of the War. Craig, welcome to the program. I'm here with Emma Vigeland.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks.
Well.
How are you doing? Congratulations on the book.
Thanks very much. We planned for it originally to come out in time for the 20th anniversary of the war, but when Biden announced the troop withdrawal in the spring, we moved it up. And coincidentally, it came out just as U.S. troops were withdrawing from Afghanistan.
I mean, it is a fascinating, it's a fascinating read. It's really sort of, I have to say, you know, I mean, professionally, I would cover the reports of the war, starting in 2004. I was very in tune with what was at least being reported through the first 3 years of the war. And this is, to see this stuff is, it's a little bit disturbing on some level, like the how much information we did not know. I mean, I don't want to say it's like you're living a lie on some level, but they're really, I mean, was an ongoing lie. Well, let's just start with something sort of remedial. Like, tell us the process in which you got a hold of these papers and what the papers are.
Yeah, so the Afghanistan papers are notes and transcripts of more than 400 interviews with people who played a role in the war. Most of them are American officials from all three presidential administrations, Obama, Bush, and Trump. These interviews were conducted by a little-known federal agency called the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan. And the interviews were carried out for what they call the Lessons Learned Project, to try and learn from our mistakes in Afghanistan. The Inspector General put out some public reports based on this, but they were really sanitized and watered down. And I wanted to find out what the actual interviews said. And so, long story short, the Washington Post put in Freedom of Information Act requests with the Inspector General. We had to fight in court for them for 3 years. We finally obtained the raw notes and transcripts, and they show time after time after time these really blunt and frank admissions of all these failures in Afghanistan. And as some of them said, it's really much worse than you think. We had a fundamental misunderstanding of Afghanistan. There were a number of ambassadors and generals who literally said, we didn't know what we were doing. So this level of admission of failure really was never said in public to the American people. It was only in these interviews.
How long of a period of time were the interviews? I mean, and I want to get into the substance of them, but the process of it is also sort of fascinating to me because people were very frank. It appears, anyways, maybe, at least the ones that have been highlighted were very frank. So, like, what is the relationship between SIGNAR, this is the group of the Inspector General? What is their relationship with other entities in the government? How long of a period of time did they interview people, and how did lieutenant generals, foreign officers, how did they have the confidence that, like, I can say this in this context?
Yeah, those are all good questions. So the Inspector General started this project around 2015. And you have to remember the timing's important because people assumed the war was coming to an end. Obama had promised to withdraw all U.S. troops from Afghanistan by the end of his second term. So at that point, the assumption was the war was ending, at least the American involvement. So the Inspector General said, this is a good time to interview people while their memories are relatively fresh, so we can learn from our mistakes in Afghanistan and not repeat them in the future. Of course, the war kept dragging on, and the Inspector General has still been interviewing people, but that was the original context. But they did go back and they interviewed people who were involved from the start under Bush, under Obama, and a little bit under Trump. We're actually still fighting in court for more documents from the Inspector General. They've continued to do interviews. We think this should all be public information. You're right, these people, a lot, but not all of them, assumed they were speaking confidentially to the Inspector General. That agency was chartered by Congress to investigate fraud, waste, and abuse in Afghanistan, but this was a different project for them where they were just doing a policy review. And they're able to interview whoever they want. I mean, it's not like they even have subpoena power if they want to use it. So they have some teeth. But this was all voluntary for the most part, these interviews. And unfortunately, the Inspector General decided it was more important to keep those private and not to make them public. Our argument in court was, what these people are saying, these were people in charge of the war, and they're admitting all their failures and how bad things were. And this was stuff the American people not only deserve to know, but need to know.
And I imagine, well, I get a couple of questions just from that too, is that I imagine some of these people were also like, this is the end of Obama's term, so maybe the implications for me are not as dramatic. But what was the point? What's the point of this exercise if it's kept private? Like,
Well,
I mean, like, what was their rationale of it? You know, we're going to keep this private. I mean, I guess presumably it all came out like everybody was like, we've done exactly the right thing. And, you know, there's. Then we can, like, why do this if at the end it's going to be private? Like, who would have access to it?
well, so they did publish some public reports, the Inspector General did, but they omitted all these astonishing quotations, right? They sanitized the interviews and watered it down. So it was sort of these dry academic bureaucratic reports that they put out. But all the people they interviewed, they didn't name more than 90% of them. They, you know, all the inflammatory stuff they left out. And the only reason is the Inspector General is just protecting his bureaucratic privileges. He's worried that people won't talk to him again if this stuff ends up in the Washington Post or in public. And, you know, whatever, that's his concern, but the law is clear. The law says this is public information. The public has a right to see this stuff. It wasn't classified. And, you know, this, in some ways, it is like the Pentagon Papers. It was this history of how screwed up things were in Afghanistan and how the government lied to the public about it. And so that's why we pushed as hard as we did to obtain them and put them all online.
All right. Well, let's get into some of the substance of it. The first, I guess, I don't know, 60 days of the war. You know, and just we're going to assess this on the I guess the stated agenda of why one would go to war. You know, being agnostic for a moment at the prospect of whether we should have actually gone to war as opposed to sort of engage in some type of police, you know, policing argument or just tried to apprehend Al-Qaeda as we would in a more sort of like a police fashion. But as far
I would say
as,
this.
You know,
I would say this. We definitely were led the wrong way, knowing what we know now. All these years later, 20 years almost since the going into war with Afghanistan. Basically, we haven't really. I don't think they really gotten into the red meat of it yet, but we were consistently misled about going into the Iraq or to the Afghanistan. Shoot. Sorry, I need to hit the invitation button. Yes, we were. Yeah, I mean, we were consistently, I think, misled from the very beginning. I don't think they, like I said, I don't think they have gotten into the red meat of the interview yet. But you have to kind of think, going back to 2001, 2002, that the Bush administration, the George W. administration, had their mind set on Iraq from day one. So even before 9/11 happened, they were going to try to find a way to go into Iraq and take out Saddam, and then just stop it. But anyway, that's a whole other topic. Let's continue. That's well, it's a whole other topic, but it's also like part of the topic. That's what I'm saying. So.
Well, while their memories are relatively fresh, so we can learn from what we were doing.
The war, and this is to see this stuff is it's a little bit disturbing on some level, like the how much information we did not know. I mean, I don't want to say it's like you're living a lie on some level, but they're really, I mean, was an ongoing lie. Well, let's just start with something sort of remedial. Like, tell us the process in which you got a hold of these papers and what the papers are.
Yeah, so the Afghanistan papers are notes and transcripts of more than 400 interviews with people who played a role in the war. Most of them are American officials from all three presidential administrations, Obama, Bush, and Trump. These interviews were conducted by a little-known federal agency called the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan. And the interviews were carried out for what they called a lessons learned project to try and learn from our mistakes in Afghanistan. The Inspector General put out some public reports based on this, but they were really sanitized and watered down. And I wanted to find out what the actual interviews said. And so, long story short, the Washington Post put in Freedom of Information Act requests with the Inspector General. We had to fight in court for them for 3 years. We finally obtained the raw notes and transcripts, and they show time after time after time these really blunt and frank admissions of all these failures in Afghanistan. And as some of them said, it's really much worse than you think. We had a fundamental misunderstanding of Afghanistan. There were a number of ambassadors and generals who literally said, we didn't know what we were doing. So this level of admission of failure really was never said in public to the American people. It was only in these interviews.
How long of a period of time were the interviews? I mean, and I want to get into the substance of them, but the process of it is also sort of fascinating to me because people were very frank. It appears, anyways, maybe, at least the ones that have been highlighted were very frank. So, like, what is the relationship between SIGNAR, this is the group of the Inspector General? What is their relationship with other entities in the government? How long of a period of time did they interview people, and how did lieutenant generals, foreign officers, how did they have the confidence that, like, I can say this in this context?
Yeah, those are all good questions. So the Inspector General started this project around 2015. And you have to remember the timing's important because people assumed the war was coming to an end. Obama had promised to withdraw all US troops from Afghanistan by the end of his second term. So at that point, the assumption was the war was ending, at least the American involvement. So the Inspector General said, this is a good time to interview people while their memories are relatively fresh, so we can learn from our mistakes in Afghanistan and not repeat them in the future. Of course, the war kept dragging on, and the Inspector General has still been interviewing people, but that was the original context. But they did go back and they interviewed people who were involved from the start, under Bush, under Obama, and a little bit on Trump. We're actually still fighting in court for more documents from the Inspector General. They've continued to do interviews. We think this should all be public information. You're right, these people, a lot, but not all of them, assumed they were speaking confidentially to the Inspector General. That agency was chartered by Congress to investigate fraud, waste, and abuse in Afghanistan, but this was a different project for them where they were just doing a policy review. And they're able to interview whoever they want. I mean, it's not like they even have subpoena power if they want to use it. So they have some teeth. But this was all voluntary for the most part, these interviews. And unfortunately, the Inspector General decided it was more important to keep those private and not to make them public. Our argument in court was, what these people are saying, these are people in charge of the war, and they're admitting all their failures and how bad things were. And this was stuff the American people not only deserve to know, but need to know.
And I imagine, I get a couple of questions just from that too, is that I imagine some of these people were also like, this is the end of Obama's term, so maybe the implications for me are not as dramatic. But what was the point? What's the point of this exercise if it's kept private? Like, I mean, like what was their rationale of it? We're going to keep this private. I mean, I guess presumably if it all came out, like everybody was like, we've done exactly the right thing. And, then we can, like, why do this if at the end it's going to be private? Like, who would have access to it?
Well, so they did publish some public reports, the Inspector General did, but they omitted all these astonishing quotations, right? They sanitized interviews and watered it down. So it was sort of these dry academic bureaucratic reports that they put out, but all the people they interviewed, they didn't name more than 90% of them. All the inflammatory stuff they left out. And the only reason is the Inspector General is just protecting his bureaucratic privileges. He's worried that people won't talk to him again if this stuff ends up in the Washington Post or in public. And, whatever, that's his concern, but the law is clear. The law says this is public information. The public has a right to see this stuff. It wasn't classified. And, and in some ways it is like the Pentagon Papers. It was this history of how screwed up things were in Afghanistan and how the government lied to the public about it. And so that's why we pushed as hard as we did to obtain them and put them all online.
All right. Well, let's get into some of the substance of it. The first, I guess, I don't know, 60 days of the war. And just we're going to assess this on the I guess the stated agenda of why one would go to war. Being agnostic for a moment at the prospect of whether we should have actually gone to war as opposed to sort of engage in some type of policing argument or just tried to apprehend Al-Qaeda as we would. In a more sort of like a police fashion. But as far as, you set out as an agenda to go to war, the first 60 days were successful, I guess, by the measure of if you wanted to get rid of the Taliban. And then it was almost like we've caught the dog who catches the car and is just sitting there stunned because their head is reeling from, bouncing on the bumper. And there was no plan for day 61, it feels like.
Well, that's true. And although we had mostly caught the car, right? The one thing we hadn't caught was Osama bin Laden. But we had opportunities for that. We missed him at Tora Bora in December 2001. But you're right. Certainly within the first few months, the Taliban have been toppled from power. And more importantly, from the United States perspective, Al-Qaeda's leaders had been killed, captured, or had fled Afghanistan. They'd gone to Pakistan, Iran, other parts of the Middle East. So we had accomplished what the original objective was. But you're right, then it was the question of now what? And we didn't have a plan. The big paradox was Afghanistan was a devastated country at that point. I mean, it was just really, really flattened by decades of war, millions of refugees. There were real fears of a famine. And now, the Taliban was gone, so they didn't have a government. So the United States had a responsibility to try and stabilize the country and try and help Afghanistan get back on its feet. The problem was President Bush, when he had run for office against Al Gore, he had promised he would not use the military in any quote unquote nation building campaigns. He assailed Clinton for doing this in the Balkans and Haiti and Somalia. So on one hand, he knows Afghanistan needs help, but he's publicly said, we're not going to do nation building. So he immediately kind of boxed himself in, and that made things much harder.
But my recollection, and maybe it's mistaken, but my recollection was that pivot was successfully made. Like, I mean, there was charges of like you ran without, he specifically said no nation building. Like that was one of the sort of like on the highlight reel of that campaign. But they turned around and did say like, and this was also, over the course of that summer, we saw a lot of reports of the Taliban destroying Buddha statues. And there was a lot of reports, I remember that summer, just about Afghanistan prior to 9/11, maybe just coincidentally. It felt like they had made that pivot, but like why didn't they, and from the book, we learned that Rumsfeld more or less was like, I think we're done, let's go. And they didn't do that. Why couldn't they make that determination there? Was it because bin Laden had gotten away at Tora Bora?
Well, these are all really good questions, right? In hindsight, and there was one interview with a diplomat named Nicholas Burns. He was at the time U.S. ambassador to NATO. Biden's just nominated him to be ambassador to China, so he's a career diplomat. But he said, yeah, we never really asked these basic questions of how long are we going to stay? What do we need to accomplish before we can leave? And he's talking about the period 2003, 2004, so even 2-3 years into the war. He's saying just nobody bothered to ask that question. Things went on autopilot because so much attention was focused on Iraq. Very quickly after the war in Afghanistan started, the Bush administration thought it had achieved a military victory there, so they started immediately planning for Iraq. And the best example of this was this memo I obtained for the book. It was a memo Donald Rumsfeld had written 1 year into the war. So 2002, he talks about going to the Oval Office to see Bush. And he tells the president, sir, I've got two generals in town. You might want to meet with them. One is General Tommy Franks, who is in charge of all military operations in the Middle East, including war plans for Iraq. The other general is a guy named Dan McNeil. And Bush responded to Rumsfeld. He said, well, yeah, Franks, I want to meet with him so we can talk about Iraq, but who's McNeil? And Rumsfeld said, sir, he's your war commander in Afghanistan. He's in charge of the war in Afghanistan. And Bush said, oh, well, I don't need to meet with him, right? So here's a commander in chief. Not only does he not remember the name of his general in charge of the war in Afghanistan, but when told by Rumsfeld about this, he just says, well, I don't need to meet with him. Why spend time on that? And to me, that kind of summed up where things were within a year of the war in Afghanistan starting.
That's
an unbelievable anecdote. And also just makes total sense when looking at how the United States positioned itself relative to Afghanistan. Like the withdrawal, if you're disinterested in the country because no resources really outside of opium, which I know we'll touch on a little bit, no resources that the Bush administration's that interested in, just withdraw then, right? And then maybe try to target bin Laden at another time. But doesn't it say so much about how the national security establishment views itself, that like the status quo was to be occupation with no end in sight as resources and energy is turned towards Iraq?
I think that's a good point, but I think you're almost in a way using too much common sense in how you're framing it. I think it was just sheer incompetence in the beginning, that they really were just so focused on Iraq, they didn't have a plan for Afghanistan. In these lessons learned interviews I obtained from the Inspector General, there was this 3-star General Doug Lute, who was the war czar for Obama and Bush. And one of his quotes was, "It's much worse than you think." And he wasn't kidding. I'll give you an example that on those early years, this General McNeil, the guy who Bush forgot his name, he said in his own interview that he said, we didn't have a campaign plan in Afghanistan. I was just told to go over and chase terrorists. Rumsfeld told me he wasn't going to send more troops, but he said we didn't have a strategy. And I thought maybe this was hyperbole, right? What general admits they don't have a strategy? But he's like, no, we didn't have one. We were just over there chasing terrorists, and I was told not to ask for any more troops. I thought maybe McNeil was exaggerating, but there was another interview with his successor, a British general named David Richards, who was in charge of US and NATO troops for about 18 months during the Bush administration. And he said the same thing. He said, we didn't have a strategy. We had a lot of tactics, but we didn't have a proper strategy in laying out our ends, ways, and means of what we were trying to accomplish. So I was shocked when I read this because, I've covered the military for a long time, but since when do you hear generals in charge of a war admit that they didn't have a strategy? They weren't saying a bad strategy or a misguided strategy. They just said, we didn't have one. I mean, that to me was, I'm still shocked by that.
Presumably, right? And I have to say, and maybe I'm a bad person. No, I'm not. I was happy to see that Rumsfeld was like having what appears to be a nervous breakdown on some level during 2003 or 2002. I mean, I found it very depressing that he exited this plane of existence without having what I thought was sufficient karmic accountability. But with that said, presumably it's Rumsfeld's strategy to develop, right? I mean, or if I come in as the general in charge of the entire theater in Afghanistan, and I hear, I look to Rumsfeld and he's like, yeah, no, just keep it up over there. Do I not say I'm going to do a strategy? I'm going to create the strategy? Where's that supposed to happen in the flow chart of this stuff?
Okay, so I'm going to explain that, but again, it's much worse than you think, even your sense of it. So the chain of command is the general in charge of Afghanistan goes up his chain of command at the Pentagon, which goes to Rumsfeld, right? But then Rumsfeld answers to the commander in chief, which is Bush. So yes, Rumsfeld is responsible, but ultimately the president's responsible, right? You can't let him off the hook and just say it was Rumsfeld's job. Bush, who didn't even know his general's name, he's the one who's responsible for a strategy in Afghanistan, or at least ordering his subordinates, whether civilian in the form of Rumsfeld or the generals, to come up with one. But if you, as you point out, what if you're in the general's shoes, right? So the general who served immediately after McNeil was a guy named Barno, David Barno. He was a 3-star general. And as he goes over there in 2003, he recognizes that the Taliban's starting to come back, that an insurgency is starting to build. So he's like, well, we got to come up with a strategy to deal with an insurgency. This isn't just hunting terrorists and Al-Qaeda. What are we going to do about this insurgency? But the army had not conducted counterinsurgency operations since Vietnam, and they had really lost all their experience with an insurgency. So Barno tells this story in this other interview for the book, in which he remembered taking a course on counterinsurgency when he was in West Point in the early 70s. And so he ordered some of the books, the textbooks he had used in the early 70s at West Point, so that he could come up with a counterinsurgency strategy. They literally were ordering books online to get shipped to Afghanistan so they could consult these old textbooks to come up with a strategy. So like I said, it's worse than you think. The generals were trying, but this is how they were flailing around trying to decide what to do.
And one of the things that I learned from the book was that the counterinsurgency, to the extent and the counterterrorism, essentially was like the catalyst for regenerating the Taliban in many respects. That there had been so much fighting over the centuries in that country, that there had already been almost like a developed sense of how you end conflict, which was, we actually have sort of like a reconciliation, and we just sort of divvy stuff up at that point. And Karzai early on was like, let's bring the Taliban in and let's do this. And we would have none of it. So we didn't just not have a strategy. We were actively rejecting strategies that were coming essentially from the Afghans.
That's right. Early on, that was really the original sin in many ways, was after we thought the Taliban had been defeated militarily, in November and December of 2001, the United Nations and the United States hosted this conference in Bonn, Germany, where all the factions from Afghanistan were invited, the warlords, the Northern Alliance, representatives of their former king. They needed to come up with a new political system. It was a recognition they'd have to write a new constitution. So they invited all these factions in Afghanistan that had been fighting each other for a long time, except for the Taliban. And in retrospect, of course, some Taliban members had expressed a willingness to come in from the cold and be part of the system, even though they had been defeated. And that's the point when the US and its Afghan allies had the most leverage. It made the most sense to try and bring them in. I don't want to overstate it. It would have been difficult politically, because back then, remember, there was such a reaction after September 11th, the public, by and large, in the United States supported the war in Afghanistan. They wanted to go after Al-Qaeda. The problem was the Bush administration kept lumping the Taliban and Al-Qaeda together, calling them all terrorists. Rumsfeld and Bush both said the Taliban have two choices. They can
Yeah, so it's glasses, but yeah, it was a great. I'm just gonna stop the interview there. It's really long. So basically, yeah, Whitlock made a great point. Again, Go find Craig Whitlock's book, The Afghanistan Papers. He's talking about how the 20-year-long war in Afghanistan had basically gutted us down from everything from troop surge to lying about the war, and we go on and on and on. I mean, but that last part gets to me. It's always that last part gets me with the fact that Bush and Rumsfeld, and I guess Dick Cheney, as I say his name correctly, Cheney, basically lied to the American people and said they were trying to stand in the way of getting to try to find an revenge, like selling people this idea of war, and that these people that trying to lump, as Whitlock said in the end there, lumping the Taliban and 9/11 together and using it as a ploy for people to want to go into Iraq or into Afghanistan, and then using it later as a way to get people to be like, yeah, Saddam Hussein, he was involved in this too. That the latter, I guess would be Iraq, was essentially a lie. We all know that it is, because essentially, I keep saying essentially, basically what it was the Bush administration used Iraq as a way to say that that Saddam was involved in 9/11, which we know is a lie, which again, we know, I don't have to say it. It was basically about him trying to avenge his family name, trying to avenge his dad. He actually openly admitted it. He said before the invasion of 03 was, he can't, I can't do it, W impression, but he's like, he knows he can't stand us, this guy tried to even attack my dad. Maybe I can get that on video, because I know it's on video. Oh, I'm yawning up a storm tonight. Oh, God. Yawning up a storm. I don't think I'm going to be able to make it. It's almost 8:30. I'm going to have to change the time zone. No pun intended. Yeah. Let's see. GGO. Yeah. Oh, I can't find it. I wish there's a couple of remarks he made after or before rather, when he chose to invade Iraq was anyway, I'm not even gonna get the fact that I was searching for the YouTube clip, and all I can see is I realized once again I hadn't shared the screen. So what I was looking for was the actual, if there's any footage of him, of George W. saying, yeah, he knows he can't stand us in Saddam. He knows he tried to attack my dad at one point. And I'm just like, yeah, that's what it was all about. It wasn't about 9/11. It wasn't about a thing. It wasn't about any kind of revenge act. The only revenge act it was avenging your family and getting your oil, among other things. But those are the two items. Yeah, I was searching for that quote, and all I could see was video of the Bushes when HW died. Every mainstream outlet was lauding him, like, oh, they're the best thing ever, and they're Bond, and blah, blah, blah. And I just look at it as just bull crap, essentially. My reaction initially when the father died was that family has taken us to war as much as any other dynasty. Democrat or Republican alike. Because of that family, we are at war today. That's just a fact. That is a solemn fact. And the son of B word. The son, the 43rd president, will go down in history as a millennial as the worst president of my generation's lifetime. Never mind what Trump has done for 4 years. And not to say that, not trying to discredit the disastrous one term, I hope, of Trump, seeing that he doesn't come back in 2024 and try to run again because he legally can. Because, the Democrats impeached him, they cleared him of all charges for a second time. That means that, yeah, he can legally run for president again. He can do it if he wants to. Now, I'm not saying he will. He's probably just trying to mess with our minds. No pun intended. I'm not going to be on conspiracy. But, it's just like, ever since the 4 years of Trump, the liberals, or the moderate libs, or the moderate Democrats, whatever you want to call them, the neo-libs are now going around saying that he was the best thing ever. Particularly during the COVID pandemic and during the BLM protest. The videos that he put out, and all the Hollywood liberals, all of which either opposed his invasion or going into Iraq and Afghanistan, and the moderate libs, including both current and former presidents alike, although the former president has since flip-flopped it, obviously, of voting to go into Afghanistan, voting to go into Iraq. It's just like, who are they fooling? Who the hell are they fooling? Who in the heck are any of the moderate Democrats? Well, they're trying to play with us, you know what I mean? They're trying to fuck. They're trying to mess with us, essentially. So, yep. So that's my little semi-rant of Afghanistan, Iraq War, and my so-called memory of it. My rant against the Bushes, which I so proudly display. I'm not going to see that. I'm not going to keep it a secret. Like I've said before, I make no secret of my disdain for the Bushes. No matter if the father was born when I was born when the father was president. I lived under Bush, the son, Junior. Yeah. Processing what we're trying to learn. So, yeah. So, basically, what was I saying before I got that message? Lost my train of thought. Yeah, but Bushes. I make no disdain for my disliking of Junior, of George W. Because his politics got us in this mess in the first place. Not saying that any Democrat, Clinton, Clinton's not an angel, and I grew up barely remembering Bill Clinton, so I won't go into that territory too much. But I'll say that Clinton is just as bad on foreign policy as George W. But the point is, the Democrats have flip-flopped and are actually hypocritical. I mean, to see Ellen say, like, be kind to one another and be nice to everyone. Yeah, you're being friends with a anti-gay anti-LGBT policy pushing, warmongering criminal president. I mean, his administration was the worst, one of the absolute worst in pushing for social policy in the United States. That's a fact as well. That is a tried and true fact. And again, I mean, I consider myself a member of the left. I mean, I'm quote unquote left wing. I'm progressive. I'm progressively left. I'm a democratic socialist in training. I mean, I'm not there yet. I still have a lot to learn. I'm currently learning a lot. I'm doing a lot of self examination, self discovery of my left politics, as I'm still quite young by some people's standards. I mean, I know I'm getting older, but I'm still young in the sense I can't run for political office. All right. Not that I would. I would never. I don't know if I would ever run for political office. It's a good job. And yeah, so kind of just put a period on that whole George W. Bush anti-gay. And it's like, I'll just say anti-LGBT. See that way. Anti-LGBT. This was him. Yeah, I need to show my screen. But this was Bush, George W. Bush, and well, anyway. You know what? I'll try to find a good clip of that one. All of that money trying to find a good clip, I try my best. I want to find something good and authentic instead of some, thing. But in a case of like default, if you can't find anything legit, and that's the only thing, you're subject to default. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that. You're subjected, I should say, to default. So yeah, basically, Ellen was pushing the whole thing with Bush and be kind to one another, and we don't always have to agree on everything, what have you. But here is then President George Walker Bush. I don't know when this is, but it was a radio address in, I believe, maybe somewhere. I would say somewhere between 2003 and 2007, maybe even sooner. Saying Congress should ban same-sex marriage. I explain at first. Another liberty neutral head with the we will go. Okay.
Today, I want to explain why I support the Marriage Protection Amendment and why I'm urging.
Again, this is then President George W. backing a ban on same-sex marriage, and it's June 3rd, 2006. So yeah, I said somewhere between 2003 and 2006. It was in 2006. So.
Urging Congress to pass it and send it to the states for ratification. Marriage is the most enduring and important human institution, honored and encouraged in all cultures and by every religious faith. Ages of experience have taught us that the commitment of a husband and a wife to love and to serve one another promotes the welfare of children and the stability of society. Marriage cannot be cut off from its cultural, religious, and natural roots without weakening this good influence on society. Government, by recognizing and protecting marriage, serves the interests of all. In our free society, people have the right to choose how they live their lives. And in a free society,
how they choose. Aren't they born that way? War criminal.
About such a fundamental social institution as marriage should be made by the people, not
social
by the courts.
Institution of marriage.
The American people have spoken clearly on this issue.
I would like to get his stance today about the separation of church and state, if such thing exists in his mind. But again, he's no longer president. That's the thing people would say. Oh, he's no longer president anymore. He's not president no more. We got to live in the times. Yeah, you dumb fucks. This man's hateful, war criminal, backwards social policy was the worst, again, for my generation. So I don't want to hear that backwards, let's forward, not back crap.
to their representatives and at the ballot box. In 1996, Congress approved the Defense of Marriage Act by overwhelming bipartisan majorities in both
passed by a Democrat, by the way.
the House and Senate, and President Clinton signed it into law. Unfortunately,
for those who want to defend and say that President Clinton was the first person to allow gay and lesbian members in his congressional staff, which is true. I mean, he still backed this, and if he did that, why did he pass this? And I was barely even alive. I'm just saying, folks.
the activist judges and some local officials have made an aggressive attempt to redefine marriage in recent years. Since 2004, state courts in Washington, California, Maryland, and New York have overturned laws protecting marriage in those states. And in Nebraska, a federal judge overturned a state constitutional amendment banning same-sex marriage. These court decisions could have an impact on our whole nation. The Defense of Marriage Act declares that no state is required to accept another state's definition of marriage. If that act is overturned by activist courts, then marriages recognized in one city or state might have to be recognized as marriages everywhere else. That would mean that every state would have to recognize marriages redefined by judges in Massachusetts or local officials in San Francisco, no matter what their own laws or state constitutions say. This national question requires a national solution, and on an issue of such profound importance, that solution should come from the people, not the courts. A constitutional amendment will put a decision that is critical to American families and American society in the hands of the American people, which is exactly where it belongs. Democracy, not court orders, should decide the future of marriage in America. Thank you for listening.
Yeah. I mean, just utter disbelief and utter hypocrisy, again, of the movement to support this man who openly opposed same-sex marriage. Had the most backwards, So think about that for a moment. Think about all of what he just said on that radio address, and then see this after this poll's out. Why is it so slow to, for Pete's sake, come on. Trying to make my point here, not to beat through all these ads, just to.
Weekend. I know it's Tuesday. Sometimes I like to ruminate on things all day Monday, so that on 100,000 people in this stadium. Beautiful stadium, by the way, that Dallas has. So Portia and I, quarterback for the Packers, and so he showed a shot of George and me laughing together, or every time another whistleblower came forward, and the referees, you guys, the referees.
Her moderate lib puns.
But during the game, they showed a shot of George and me. They thought, why is a gay Hollywood liberal sitting next to a conservative Republican president? Didn't even notice I'm holding the brand new iPhone 11. And
Yeah. Look at our audience.
But a lot of people were mad, and they did what people do when they're mad. They tweet, and but here's one tweet that I loved. This person says, Ellen and George Bush together makes me have faith in America again. And
whatever.
Here's the thing. I'm friends with I have. We're all different with George Bush. Exactly.
Whatever.
Here's the thing. I'm friends with George Bush. In fact, I'm friends with a lot of people who don't share the same beliefs that I have. We're all different, and I think that we've forgotten that that's okay that we're all different. For instance, I wish people wouldn't wear fur. I don't like it, but I'm friends with people who wear fur. And I'm friends with people who are furry, as a matter of fact. I have someone on everything. Doesn't mean that I'm not going to be friends with them. When I sign to everyone, doesn't matter.
Okay.
People that think the same way that you do. I mean, be kind to everyone. Doesn't matter.
Okay. Here's where she missteps. Here's where she missteps on a lot of things. Take what you just saw in that radio address from 06 to that clip of Ellen having just commiserating or schmoozing. I don't know how you call it, but you can just think of whatever term you want. Of smooching with George W. Again, she wants to say, be kind to one another. Be careful. Like, come on. Be kind to, a war criminal, hateful president who pushed every anti-gay and every anti-social policy law into power when he was president. This guy was for lack of a better word, a religious zealot. He was pushing his Christian religion in everybody's mouths, even when it didn't need to be. And it gets me so infuriated that good people like Ellen, don't get me wrong, she is good, she just bows down to this. And this is better than her. I looked up to her. I will say this, when I was younger, I looked up to Ellen. I thought she was funny. I liked her show. I liked her old sitcom. And I know that's old news, but I'm just like, again, this is all kind of going back to the Afghanistan war. I launched into a talk about the Bushes and my, again, disdain for George W. We got way off into the from Afghanistan to my disdain for the Bushes to him opposing same-sex marriage and what a segue. What a segue that was. But it's live streaming, folks. What else can you do? It just really gets into my skin. I don't know what else to say. Just the whole thing, like, be kind to one another. Be kind to a war criminal president. Again, like, I can't keep saying, I know I keep saying it, but I'm going to keep saying it more. He's a freaking war criminal president. That's what the moderate left, because I say moderate left because I want to distinct from the progressives on the left and that want to actually change not just the Democratic Party, but the left in general, to the do nothing, no change, old, centrist, conservative, moderate libs, neo-libs that are still in power and want to die at their desk. And they want to work till they die, till their dying day, till they pass away. It just really gets under my freaking skin, folks. Or I should say, folks. Yeah, we definitely need to be more progressive. That's what I'm hoping for. I'm starting. We're an hour into the show, so that's great. I think last 2 hours. This is definitely a redone show. A good redo of episode 6. Talked a lot of this stuff. Oh, I feel like I'm in so much shape. You know what I'm gonna do every time I run into things to say? I'm just gonna play the solo clip from Cedar, the one with Ruben. So, yeah. This clip always gets to me. I know I spelled his name wrong. Actually, I did spell his name wrong. I meant to say, they down. Okay, folks, hold on. Here it is. Oh, shoot. I forgot to share my screen. I always forget. I need to have like a reminder thing. Here it says, reminder, share Want to do a clip or your signature clips of the show? Share screen. Because you already know how to share the audio.
And with the wrong opinion.
That's it.
Stephen said, they hate Dave Rubin because he's a gay man with the wrong opinion. Dave Rubin is gay? No! He got a husband? I did not know. I was in his presence. I didn't know. I shook his hand. Sit down with him. Why would y'all tell me? Why did y'all tell me before I went on the show with him? No. Dave Rubin because he's a gay man with the wrong opinion. Dave Rubin is gay? No. He got a husband? No. He got a husband? I did not know. I was in his presence. I didn't know. I shook his hand. Ah. I shook his hand. Ah. Sit down with him. Why did y'all tell me before I went on the show? Oh, Stephen, why would you send me this? Oh my gosh, Stephen, you ruined my day.
So funny. It never gets old. That just gets me all the time. It's gonna be like a signature show. If I run out of things to say, if I'm not in the best mood, if I look bored, I'm just gonna pull that clip up of Sotomayor on the show. The majority part clip of them showing Sotomayor realizing that David was gay. He didn't know. Oh, that's still funny. It's too funny. That is hilarious. That's like one of the most hilarious clips ever for Love Media. Speaking of Love Media, I don't know if you guys heard of Dead Pundit Society. I saw a tweet by them. They're coming back. They asked, what do you want to see happen? I said, I'd like to see diversity of Love Media. Talk of diversity of history of Love Media. And if I pull the tweet up, I can show you. Because that's what we do on the show. I didn't know he had a husband. He got a husband. This is so funny. It's so funny. And you can't tell me it's not. Don't know who Jane Paul was, but I'm going to say rest in peace. I'm not sharing my Twitter account. No, I'm not. The screen share's off. What was I going to show? I always get lost in Twitter. Dead Pundit Society. They're coming back, and I didn't even know they even left. It's weird. I gotta start watching Dead Pundit Society or listening to it. So had it left or had it not left? I saw a clip that said, yeah. Yes. Screen sharing it. So yeah. So hey, so VPS will be back soon. Let's see how it. I would love to see the diversity of Love Media. I want to see the talk of, say, the diversity of media on the left. When I say progressive, when I say left, I mean progressive left. Why are we so divided? That's what I'd like to kind of know. Why are we? I mean, we know why we're diverse. because we all think the same thing, and we all want the same thing, eventually. But obviously not the same thing, that's for sure, that's what I should say. But we're all just like, during Bernie's second run for presidency, we were all divided. Even 2 years before that, like, in the 4 years of the Trump administration, the horrible, sadistic Trump administration, many words, we were all united. So during those of us on the left who were progressive, we were coming into our own, like myself, and to see from the time of Bernie's first campaign to the 4 years of the Trump administration to the second campaign, we were divided. We were united. We were liking each other. We were, when I say we, I mean the diversity, the people there. I hadn't even started this yet, so I had yet to start this podcast when I did the first one. Not to say that I did listen to a lot of podcasts. I would say that. We just became the left media became so divided and so fragmented. It has been so since Biden has been in office. And I'm talking specifically about progressive left media, not mainstream media, because mainstream media is so aligned with the Biden presidency, with everything that they're doing, except Fox. Cable news, CNN, MSNBC, all the national networks, all the mainstream corporate networks like ABC, NBC, CBS, they're all aligned in some way, shape, or form with how they're always doing good stories on the Biden presidency. Maybe a few critical ones every now and then, but they seem to be all like agreeing with one another. And while that is going on over on the left, on the progressive left, while we should be doing the same thing, it isn't. It's not. It hasn't been. It hasn't been that way for so long. I mean, yeah, everybody started going independent. And I don't blame people for doing that. You know, that's just life. But so I kind of want to see that happen in society. I think I should watch more. I should watch the show more. I think yes, feeling. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's what time. So it's almost 9. I can't keep doing this. I gotta restrict myself. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna take notes. One thing I haven't been doing. I need to get a notepad, do some note taking, put some structure in the show. If one of the things I want to do is kind of expand the show, make it more interesting, I should also kind of maybe put some structure. So actually physically. 7. So it's almost 9. Again, early, but I appreciate talking to one Twitch. That's fun. That's, it takes time. I guess I get some more, more interesting. Yeah, put some more structure into it. I will hopefully get more viewers, continue. But so talk about Afghanistan, show the majority report interview with Fred Whitlock. Go find his book, Afghanistan Papers. It's basically a book version of it was released in print by the Washington Post, which again Whitlock books. Spoke about my disdain for the Bush administration, the George W. Bushes in general. She played a radio clip of W's anti-gay radio address now, saying peace friends, and did a little rant myself, and then what DPS and what I think they should talk about. Fragmentation, diversity of local media. Why, if we're so diverse, why are we fragmented? Why have we been disunified as we have been? Because there are some really good people, and then there's some really weird people. And I won't name names, but I know who they are. I won't name names right now. Not yet. Not today. Not today. But maybe one day soon. One day soon. So, yes, all the captions. Again, catch the show Monday to Friday, 7 to 10 on Twitch and YouTube. Although I'm ending it early again, I'm going to put some structure into the show. Where I physically go. 7. Read me on Substack. TJRS, that's Substack.com. Great. I got some great articles on there. I mean, not the best in the world, but hey, I'm trying, folks. Follow me on social media, which is down there at the bottom. I don't need here, as you've seen before. And if you can, if you must, actually check it. If you're able to. I'm not asking for much. Just to keep the show going. Maybe get a staff to donate to the Patreon. Patreon.com/TJRS. And of course, as always, be sure to, if you're on YouTube, hit them like buttons. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell. Ring the bell. Watch the show. Ring the bell. Ring the bell. Hit the like button. Hit the thumbs up. That's all that matters. I'm trying my best. I'm still new. Still new. It's perfect. It's you. But it's as someone would say, I don't know. I'm getting a little tired, folks. It is not Sunday. So, as always, I will see you tomorrow, hopefully at 7 p.m. on the dot, not sooner. As if Claudia is saying, yeah, go on here at 7. Anyway, I will see you then. As always, left is best. Best in power to Michael Brooks. Best in power to Ed Asner. And I will see you tomorrow. Graphic. There it is. I will see you tomorrow, as always.